Dr. Rook Jang had a simple policy about mornings aboard Havens Point. Never make eye contact with the coffee machine before it finished brewing. The ancient piece of Earth technology was temperamental at best, homicidal at worst, and had once sprayed scalding liquid across 3 decks when someone dared to interrupt its cycle. Today, like every day for the past 3 years, he waited patiently while it wheezed and gurgled through its morning routine. "Good morning, Doctor," chirped the station's AI. "Today's diplomatic incident probability is at 47%, down 3% from yesterday." "Only 47%? Must be a slow day." Rook grabbed his now safe cup of coffee and pulled up his research notes on his tablet. Havens Point wasn't exactly what he'd imagined when he'd signed up for xenobiological studies at the Academy. The trading station hung in space like a massive geometric Christmas ornament, all sharp angles and gleaming metal, perpetually orbiting a star that had never quite decided on a color. The station's corridors were already bustling with morning traffic. A Zenthari merchant floated past, its gas-filled body changing colors rapidly as it haggled with a 4-armed Proxian over the price of rare minerals. 2 Mechlor maintenance workers skittered across the ceiling, their magnetic limbs making soft clicking sounds against the metal. Just another perfectly normal morning in what had to be the galaxy's most bizarre workplace. Rook's lab was situated in what the station's residents jokingly called the Zoo Wing, officially designated as Xenobiological Research Center Delta. The air here was kept at a careful neutral pressure and temperature, accommodating to most species while being immediately lethal to none. He'd learned that lesson the hard way after an incident involving a heat-loving Pyraxian and a cold-adapted Frostwalker sharing the same observation room. The resulting temperature war had nearly frozen half the wing. "Morning, you beautiful disasters," he called out to his various research subjects as he entered the lab. The collection of creatures that greeted him would have sent most Earth zoologists into cardiac arrest. There were levitating crystal formations that might or might not be sentient, depending on the phase of their local moon. A colony of what he dubbed quantum ants existed in 12 dimensions simultaneously and occasionally left mathematics equations written in pheromones. But it was the newest arrival that had Rook both excited and slightly concerned. In Containment Room 3, behind carefully calibrated force fields, floated what appeared to be a cloud of living stardust. The preliminary scans suggested it was either a previously unknown form of cosmic life or a very lost swarm of space plankton. "Right then," he muttered, pulling up a fresh research form. "Let's see what kind of impossible biology you're going to throw at me today." Life as Havens Point's lead xenobiologist was never boring, but at least it was predictable in its chaos. Rook had no idea that today his carefully maintained routine was about to be shattered in ways that would make his quantum ant's dimensional shenanigans look positively mundane in comparison. The Vexithari arrived during the station's artificial sunset, when most of the regular traffic had died down. Rook was just finishing up his analysis of the cosmic dust cloud when security called. "Dr. Jang, we've got some refugees requiring biological clearance. There's something you need to see for yourself." The family huddled in the quarantine chamber looked like living geodes that had learned to walk. Their crystalline bodies caught the light and scattered it into prismatic patterns across the walls, creating a light show that would put the aurora borealis to shame. The adult Vexithari, the one Rook presumed was the parent, stood about 7 feet tall, with faceted limbs that chimed softly with each movement. But it was the cubs that made Rook stop dead in his tracks. 3 little crystalline beings, no larger than human toddlers, clustered behind their parents' legs. Their bodies were still partially translucent, their internal matrix of light-catching crystals not yet fully formed. They made soft tinkling sounds that reminded him of wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Hello," Rook said, activating his universal translator. "I'm Dr. Jang, the station's xenobiologist. I need to run some basic scans to ensure everyone's healthy and safe." The parent's crystal structure vibrated, creating a haunting melody that the translator interpreted as speech. "We seek asylum. The cubs. They are not safe in our home system anymore. Rook didn't press for details. He'd seen enough refugee families to know when not to push. Instead, he focused on gaining their trust, moving slowly and narrating each action before he took it. I'm going to use this scanner now. It's completely harmless, just uses light to check your crystalline structure. Would you like to see how it works first? He demonstrated on his own arm, and the cub's frightened chiming gradually shifted to curious pings. The smallest one even ventured forward, extending a tiny crystalline appendage to touch the scanner. Over the next hour, Rook learned that Vexathari cubs grew by absorbing specific wavelengths of light, their internal matrix slowly building complex patterns that would eventually form their adult consciousness. It was fascinating from a scientific perspective, but what really got him was how the cubs had started to relax, their crystal bodies beginning to glow with soft, warm colors that his instruments identified as signs of contentment. "Your children are perfectly healthy," he told the parent, whose relief manifested as a cascade of rainbow refractions. "I'm assigning you quarters in the xenobiology wing. The lighting there can be adjusted to optimize their growth cycle." The smallest cub had taken to following Rook around, mimicking his movements with surprising accuracy for a being made of living crystal. It made a sound like tiny bells laughing whenever he looked its way. "Welcome to Haven's Point," he said softly, knowing that their arrival was about to make his predictably chaotic life even more interesting. 3 days after the Vexathari family's arrival, Haven's Point received visitors that made Rook's coffee machine seem positively friendly in comparison. The Kraxon hunting party swaggered onto the station like they owned it, their scaled bodies covered in trophy armor made from various species' remains. Their leader, a massive specimen that Rook's database identified as Hunter Captain Vask, wore a belt made of crystalline shards that made his stomach turn. The station's security chief, a normally unflappable Andorian named Kex, called an emergency staff meeting. "They've got diplomatic credentials from 3 major systems," she explained, her antennae twitching in frustration. "Apparently they're cultural preservation experts." "That's what they're calling themselves now?" Rook couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. He'd heard about the Kraxon. Most xenobiologists had. They claimed to be preserving endangered species, but their idea of preservation involved keeping trophies of said species in their personal collections. "Just keep your refugees out of sight," Kex warned. "We can't legally stop them from being here, but—" The station's AI interrupted with its characteristic cheerfulness. "Diplomatic incident probability has increased to 89%. Would you like me to prepare the containment fields?" Rook didn't get a chance to respond. The lab's door hissed open, and 3 Kraxon hunters filled the frame with their bulky frames. Their scales clicked against their trophy armor as they moved, creating a sound like rattling bones. "We seek audience with the station's biological expert," Hunter Captain Vask announced, his translator making his gravelly voice sound even more menacing, his eyes fixed on Rook with predatory intensity. "We track rare species, crystalline entities. Perhaps you have seen them." Rook kept his face neutral, thanking his years of poker nights with the engineering crew. "Haven's Point sees all sorts of species. You'll have to be more specific." The hunter's clawed hand tapped one of the crystal shards on his belt. "Vexathari, particularly interested in younger specimens. For cultural preservation, of course." His mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile, but looked more like a threat display. "Haven't seen any," Rook lied smoothly, "but I'll be sure to file the proper notification if I do, as per station protocols." The other 2 hunters had started wandering his lab, their clawed hands hovering near specimen containers. One paused near the quantum ant's enclosure, and Rook had to resist the urge to tackle him away from it. The last thing he needed was a 12-dimensional ant colony getting loose because some trophy hunter couldn't keep his hands to himself. "Strange," Vask mused, taking a deep breath through his sensory pits. "Our scanners detected crystalline resonance patterns consistent with juvenile Vexathari. Coming from this very section." Probably picking up my mineral samples. Rook gestured to a nearby shelf of genuine non-living crystals. They can mimic biological signatures sometimes. Fascinating stuff, really. I'd be happy to bore you with the details. The hunter captain's tail lashed once, betraying his irritation. We will be conducting our own investigation. Our diplomatic status gives us full access to all public areas of the station. Of course, Rook smiled with all the warmth of a deep space vacuum. Just remember to file your research permits with the xenobiology department. Wouldn't want any diplomatic incidents. After they left, Rook immediately activated his secure channel to the hidden quarters where the Vexathari family was staying. Don't leave your rooms. Don't make any sounds that might carry. I'll figure something out. The parents' response came as a quiet, worried chime. The cubs' usually bright signatures had dimmed to barely visible pinpricks of light, their fear manifesting as literal darkness. Rook checked his tablet. 7 more days until the refugee transport was due to arrive. 7 days to keep a family of living crystals hidden from professional hunters on a station with more security cameras than actual security. The AI chimed in helpfully. Diplomatic incident probability now at 97%. Would you like me to begin recording witness statements for the inevitable investigation? Not helping, Rook muttered, already starting to formulate plans. He had a feeling he was going to need something stronger than coffee to get through this week. It happened during the station's night cycle, when the artificial lighting dimmed to simulate dusk. Rook was running a final check on his security measures before heading to his quarters, when the station's AI spoke in a tone he'd never heard before, urgent, dropping all its usual cheerfulness. Dr. Jiang, unauthorized access detected in Xenobiology Section C, multiple entities approaching refugee quarters. He was running before the AI finished speaking. The security feeds on his tablet showed 3 Kraxon signatures moving through the maintenance corridors. Paths that weren't on any public station maps. Someone had leaked the information. "Where's station security?" Rook demanded, sprinting down the corridor. "Security Chief Kex is dealing with a suspicious reactor breach in engineering. It appears to be a coordinated diversion." Of course it was. The hunters had planned this well, choosing a time when the station was running on minimal staff and creating a crisis that would draw away any potential interference. Rook's legs burned as he pushed himself faster, taking shortcuts through his lab spaces. He heard the crystalline screams before he saw them, a sound like breaking glass mixed with wind chimes in a hurricane. The door to the refugee quarters had been forced open, its control panel smoking from some kind of override device. Inside, the scene made his blood freeze. 2 Kraxon hunters were trying to corral the cubs into containment units, while the third grappled with the parent. The adult Vexathari's crystalline body was cracked in several places, leaking luminescent fluid that spattered the floor like liquid starlight. "Stop!" Rook's shout echoed through the room. "You have no authorization to—" "We have every authorization needed." Hunter Captain Vask turned, holding up a datapad without releasing his grip on the parent Vexathari. "These specimens are now property of the Kraxon Preservation Society, for their own protection, of course." One of the cubs made a sound that Rook had never heard before, a high, keening cry that spoke of pure terror. Its smallest sibling had already been shoved into a containment unit, its light dimming to near darkness. The third cub was trying to hide behind a piece of furniture, its crystal body vibrating in fear. Something snapped inside Rook's mind. Later, xenopsychologists would study the security footage and write papers about human protective instincts and the neurological triggers of parental rage responses. They would discuss how humans, despite not being the physically strongest species, could exhibit extraordinary strength when protecting young, even young of other species. But in that moment, Rook wasn't thinking about any of that. His world had narrowed to a single fact. Someone was hurting children, children he had sworn to protect. "The human appears agitated," one of the hunters commented, reaching for a weapon. "Perhaps we should—" He never finished the sentence. Rook moved with a speed that surprised even himself, crossing the room in 3 long strides. His fist connected with the hunter's jaw with a satisfying crunch, sending trophy armor scattering across the floor. "You want to preserve something?" Rook's voice had dropped to a growl that didn't sound entirely human. "Let's preserve the ancient human tradition of beating the absolute hell out of child traffickers." The second hunter abandoned his attempt to catch the hiding cub and charged at Rook. But years of handling dangerous specimens had given the xenobiologist excellent reflexes. He ducked under the hunter's swing and drove his elbow into the scaled abdomen, following up with a knee strike that sent the Kraxan stumbling backward. "Release the specimens," Vask ordered, finally letting go of the injured parent to draw what looked like a high-powered stun weapon. "You're interfering with official preservation efforts." "No," Rook cut him off, positioning himself between the hunters and the cubs. "I'm preserving something too. I'm preserving their right to grow up free and unharmed. I'm preserving their family unit. And most importantly—" He picked up a piece of fallen lab equipment, weighing it in his hand. "I'm preserving the human tradition of protecting children, all children, from predators like you." The station's AI chimed in, its cheerful tone restored. "Diplomatic incident probability has reached 100%, recording multiple violations of station protocol, including attempted kidnapping, assault on station personnel, and—" A pause. "Oh my, I didn't know humans could bend armor that way." The smallest cub's containment unit lay forgotten in the chaos. Its lid had cracked, and the tiny crystalline being emerged, chiming in distress. When one of the hunters moved toward it, Rook's expression changed from anger to something that made even the hardened Kraxan take a step back. "Touch that child," Rook said with deadly calm, "and they won't find enough of you to preserve." What happened next would become something of a legend in multiple star systems. The station's security footage would be studied by species trying to understand why humans, despite their relatively unimpressive physical attributes, were classified as a do-not-provoke species by every major galactic power. But in that moment, all Rook cared about was fulfilling the most basic human instinct, protecting the young and vulnerable, regardless of species, regardless of cost. The AI's voice carried a note of what might have been appreciation. Updating station records. Adding new classification. Humans, extremely dangerous when cubs are threatened. Hunter Captain Vask fired his stun weapon, but Rook had already rolled behind a storage unit. The energy blast hit his precious coffee machine instead, and for once, the temperamental device's tendency to malfunction worked in his favor. It exploded in a spray of scalding liquid and steam, temporarily blinding the nearest hunter. "You picked the wrong lab to raid," Rook called out, grabbing a canister of experimental suspension gel from a nearby shelf. "Fun fact about human xenobiologists. We spend our careers handling the galaxy's most dangerous life forms. We get really good at improvising." He hurled the canister at the hunter's feet. The impact released a cloud of quick-hardening gel designed for containing explosive specimens. One of the Kraxan found his legs frozen to the floor, his struggles only making the substance harden faster. The other hunter charged through the steam cloud, trophy armor glistening with moisture. Rook ducked under a swinging arm and grabbed one of the dangling crystal trophies, using it as a lever to redirect the hunter's momentum. The larger alien crashed into a rack of specimen containers, sending them clattering to the floor. "The quantum ants!" Rook shouted in mock horror. "Now you've done it!" The hunter scrambled back in panic, looking for the supposedly escaped 12-dimensional insects. That moment of distraction was all Rook needed. He vaulted over a workbench, grabbed a piece of broken equipment, and swung it like a club. The impact sent several trophy shards flying from the hunter's armor. Vask, meanwhile, had worked his way around to flank Rook. "Impressive," the hunter captain growled, "but futile. We are professional hunters. You are merely a scientist." "Correction," Rook panted, backing toward his specimen storage units. "I'm a human scientist protecting children. Do you know what happened to the last predator species that threatened human young? They're extinct. We call them wolves, made great pets once we domesticated them." He punched a code into the storage unit behind him. The door hissed open, releasing a cloud of cryogenic vapor. The temperature in the room plummeted instantly. Another fun fact about humans, Rook continued, not even shivering as frost formed on his skin. We can handle extreme temperature changes way better than most species. How's that cold-blooded biology working out for you? The Kraxan hunters' movements had already started to slow, their reptilian physiology struggling with the sudden cold. Vask fired another stun blast, but his trembling aim sent it wide. The trapped hunter finally managed to break free of the hardened gel, taking chunks of floor plating with him. He lunged at Rook, who sidestepped and used the hunter's own momentum to send him sliding across the now icy floor, straight into the open cryogenic unit. "That's one," Rook muttered, slamming the unit shut. He turned to face the remaining hunters, noting with satisfaction that frost was forming on their trophy armor. "Want to see what other environmental hazards I work with daily?" The second hunter tried to circle around toward the cubs, who had huddled together behind their injured parent. It was exactly the wrong move. Rook's expression darkened, and he reached for a rack of specimen collectors. "You know what these are?" He activated one, creating a localized gravity well that pulled at the hunter's trophy armor. They're for collecting gas-based life forms, creates a containment field that not even quantum particles can escape. "Want to see what happens when I reverse the polarity?" He didn't wait for an answer. The gravity field inverted, sending the hunter flying across the room. The alien slammed into the wall with enough force to crack his trophy armor, then slumped to the floor, unconscious. "And that's two." Only Vask remained, the hunter captain's scales now covered in a layer of frost. He raised his weapon again, but his cold-numbed fingers couldn't pull the trigger. "Final lesson about humans," Rook advanced slowly, his breath visible in the freezing air. "We're persistence predators. In our early evolution, we hunted by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. I can keep this up all day, Captain. Can you?" Vask, showing more wisdom than his subordinates, lowered his weapon. "This violation of our diplomatic status will not go unnoticed." "Neither will your attempted kidnapping of refugee children," Rook countered, reaching for the station's emergency comm. "I've had the AI recording everything. Let's see how your diplomatic immunity holds up against evidence of trafficking endangered sentience." The hunter captain's expression shifted from anger to something approaching respect. "You would risk interstellar incident for alien cubs?" "No," Rook corrected him, his voice hard. "I would risk an interstellar incident because it's the right thing to do. The fact that they're children just means I won't feel bad about enjoying this part." His fist connected with Vask's jaw, sending the final hunter crashing to the floor. As security alarms finally began blaring throughout the station, Rook turned to check on the Vexathari family. The cubs immediately surrounded him, their crystal bodies chiming with relief and gratitude. The station's AI spoke up. "Security Chief Kex is en route. Also, Dr. Zhang, your body temperature is approaching dangerous levels, though I must note that your combat effectiveness at sub-zero temperatures has been most enlightening for my database on human capabilities." "Thanks," Rook managed through chattering teeth. "Now how about turning the heat back on?" The next few days on Haven's Point were interesting, to say the least. Security footage of the incident had somehow leaked to the galactic networks, causing quite a stir. Rook found himself dealing with an endless stream of official inquiries, alongside some rather unexpected consequences. The station's mess hall had become something of an impromptu gathering place for species discussing the event. A group of manted warriors had taken to raising their foreclaws in salute whenever Rook passed by, apparently deeply impressed by his defense of the young. The Zenthari merchants had started a betting pool on how long it would take for humans to be reclassified as an apex protective species. "The Galactic Council has reviewed the evidence," Security Chief Kex informed him, her antennae twitching with amusement. "The Kraxan's diplomatic status has been permanently revoked. Also, 3 separate species have requested human security personnel specifically for their nursery ships." The station's AI had updated its diplomatic incident probability matrix to include a new factor: proximity to human protective range. It now cheerfully warned species not to conduct any suspicious activities within 100 meters of human-operated facilities if cubs of any species were present. But the most significant change came from the Vexathari themselves. The parent, now recovered from their injuries, had shared the story with their entire species. Within weeks, the crystalline beings had modified their entire society's defensive protocols. Now every Vexathari creche had at least one human supervisor. The galactic scientific community has asked me to remind you that throwing a premium coffee machine at an armed hunter is not standard xenobiological procedure, the AI announced one morning, as Rook installed his new, significantly more robust brewing system. Neither is kidnapping children, he replied, then paused as something small and crystalline clinked against his leg. The youngest Vexathari cub, still waiting for their refugee transport, had taken to following him around the lab. Its crystal matrix now generated patterns that the xenolinguists swore were attempts to replicate human laughter. The station's new security protocols included a specific clause about the protection of young, regardless of species. They called it the Human Protective Doctrine, though Rook thought that was a bit dramatic. He'd just done what any human would do. Updated station statistics, the AI chimed in. Attempted crimes against cubs have dropped to 0. However, requests for human personnel have increased by 3,000%. Would you like to review the job offers? Rook looked down at the small crystalline being happily chiming by his feet, then at the new sign posted in every docking bay. Warning: this station protected by human instincts, all cubs safe here. No thanks, he smiled. I think I'm exactly where I need to be. 6 months after the Havens Point incident, as it came to be known, the station had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The once quiet xenobiology wing now served as an unofficial sanctuary, with Rook's lab designated as a safe haven for refugee families of all species. The Galactic Council had been forced to establish new protocols regarding the protection of young sentients, informally known as the Zhang Protocols. More amusing to Rook was the new warning label that appeared on human personnel files. Warning: will respond with extreme prejudice to threats against juvenile sentience. His old research subjects had been joined by a steady stream of displaced families seeking temporary shelter. The quantum ants had actually started arranging themselves into protective formations around the youngsters' play areas across all 12 dimensions. But perhaps the most profound change was in how the galaxy viewed humans. No longer were they seen as just another spacefaring species with peculiar biology and odd customs. Now they were known as something far more significant: universal protectors of the young. The station's AI had the final word on the matter. You know, Dr. Zhang, I've updated my understanding of human nature. You're not the most powerful species, or the most technologically advanced, but you've proven something far more important. In a galaxy full of predators, humans will always choose to be protectors. Rook just smiled, watching as cubs of a dozen species played safely under Havens Point's artificial sun.